And this is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio and the West Point Football Report. Going into week 4 of the season with my colleague John Chuhran, and Jack McGuirk will join us in a moment. Just back from Columbus, Ohio. We're on site. We're the only New York media which covered the game in person. And a big day, difficult day on the field for Army, John, but 108,000 people at the game. It was really something to see, and a lot of Army fans. There were a couple of pregame events I got a chance to visit, and so it was quite a notable college football day. What did it look like when you were watching?
Well, on television, obviously, every time you see an Ohio State game, the stands are 90% filled with Ohio State red and white. And Ken, I was kind of curious as to what your experience was to see if that was the case, because television always captures the red and white, but I didn't know if you saw anything different there in your being there in person.
Oh, absolutely. It was amazing. It takes a while for everyone to get into the stadium, but they do an amazing job. Outside the stadium, at about 11, 12 o'clock, it started to look like Midtown Manhattan at lunchtime in terms of the people out on the streets. A couple of big souvenir stores, restaurants. There was a band that was going to be playing. Tailgates in all directions. I mean, it really fans out across the campus. Amazing to see. But I would say there were about 5,000 Army fans there. They were the only ones wearing black and gold, and really stood out from everybody else in red. Really looked like there was not an empty seat. You always, when you go to a game, you kind of look around the upper deck, the rim, and there were no empty seats at the top of the upper deck or at the top of the end zone stands. They redid the stadium there about 10 years ago, added about 20,000 seats, modernized it. They built a new facade around the outside, which supported adding about 20 upper deck rows around the rim. And then also the big end zone stands, which were somewhat controversial because the stadium has always been known as a horseshoe. Sure. So to close it was really something the traditionalists out there were a little uncomfortable with. In fact, they said they didn't build them absolutely permanently. They're not part of the built into the original stadium, which was built in the 1920s. So that they theoretically could be pulled out, but I don't think they're going to give up 20,000 seats when they're selling them to every game. Great to see. And of course, really the marching band was phenomenal. We have videotape of that on our YouTube page and also on our West Point Football Report page. The precision they did. Seeing the signature Ohio, you've seen it on television, but seeing it in person, the precision they have in just forming that signature. And then at the end, of course, one of the seniors each year, for each game is designated to dot the I in Ohio. So that's a big deal.
I'm curious also, Ken, how was it at the end of the game with the playing of the alma maters?
Well, it was very nice. I ran down to the field and went over by where the Army fans and the cadet band were sitting right behind one end zone. And the Army team, they congratulated the Ohio State players and then ran over to right in front of the band, and the alma mater was played. It was noticeable the Ohio State players stayed out at midfield, which is a little disappointing. They stood at attention. They just didn't kind of realize the significance of the ceremony. But it was neat to see. Very quiet in the stadium for the West Point alma mater. Then the Ohio State alma mater was played, and really a big performance they do for that. And the Army players went right behind the Ohio State players and stood at attention as they do. So it was really a phenomenal day. As far as the game itself, Army played well in the first half. Ahmad Bradshaw led a 99-yard drive with Darnell Woolfolk picking up yards, Jordan Asbury running the pitch, John Traynor running the pitch plays, Andy Davidson in for a while, and Kel Walker in. They were making some yardage and went the length of the field. Said Ohio State had only given up 2 rushing touchdowns so far this year.
And even more than that, Ken, they pointed out that the 99-yard drive was the longest scoring drive that Ohio State has ever allowed. So that's a significant achievement by Army.
Oh, it was. And then Ohio State had moved ahead, and they had 17-7 at the half. Army came out. They had the ball at the start of the third quarter, moved down the field, but unfortunately there was a fumble when in a handoff between Ahmad Bradshaw trying to get the ball to Darnell Woolfolk, they were hit just as the exchange was being made, and the ball went loose. Ohio State picked it up, and they scored just a couple of plays later. Their quarterback, Barrett, J.T. Barrett, looked phenomenal. He'd been getting some criticism this year, but his touch passing, he'd throw left, throw right, and then when the defense was starting to cheat towards the sidelines, he'd throw it over the middle.
And you have to admit that 25 for 33 for 270 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, that's a pretty good day.
Yeah, and then, of course, the freshman, J.K. Dobbins, had a big day. He had a 52-yard run in the third quarter that really broke open the game right after the Army fumble. And then just after that, the Dobbins run was after the missed field goal. Army missed a 43-yard field goal, which really took away their momentum. They're thinking they can kick the field goal, and they're only down 17-10 in the third quarter, and they're starting to gain momentum on offense. So this field goal hurt because Dobbins then did the 52-yard run, and then on the next drive, Army fumbled, as I described, and Terry McLaurin took a 20-yard pass from Barrett and scored with 5:12 to go in the third quarter, and that pretty much was the game. 24 at 31-7. So it was tough after that. Ohio State's got size, they had depth, and as Coach Monken said in the postgame, a number of future NFL players. He had been talking all preseason about the quality of the defensive line of Ohio State, playing a 4-3, which we don't see that much anymore, kind of the old NFL kind of defense with 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends all down. And that's tough to run against. I mean, it's really a good run-stopping defense. So it was tight, but Army accounted itself well. It was tough to see Ryan England get hurt in the second half. Really, as described by CBS Sports, the best defensive player amongst the 3 academies this season. And Coach Monken didn't have a specific report on the press conference on Tuesday about Ryan's situation, except they'd be evaluating it later in the week.
They haven't really identified what the injury is, and that's troubling because you can't really gauge when he'll come back. Another loss occurred earlier in the week when Jalen Sharp suffered what is reported to be a torn anterior cruciate ligament. I suffered that on the ball field in my senior year in college, and I can tell you that if he works very hard, he might be back in 6 weeks, but he won't be back any sooner than that.
Well, that's being back potentially for the Navy game, which certainly would be helpful. Elijah Riley's been out with an academic issue, so that's we'll see what happens there. So Army's really got a light situation. They're really concerned about the defensive backfield. They mentioned today a couple of players who will move up, and so we'll see how Coach Monken plays that. They're looking at bringing, this is really just one of those opportunities for some younger players to step up. They're actually looking at a couple of the wide receivers to move over to play defense, and that apparently is the direction they're going. So we'll see, but a good experience. Also like to mention that we got a chance to go to some of the pregame events at Ohio State. We found out that there's an actual relationship between the Army ROTC department there and West Point. At least 2 recent professors of military instruction at Ohio State have been West Point graduates. And so they actually did a fundraiser for Colonel Chuck Schretzman, who's been ailing with ALS, and we wish him the best. They actually ran a game ball from Dayton, Ohio, 65 miles the night before, the Thursday night. And Thursday, by a number of the ROTC cadets, joined by a couple of West Point cadets, I understand, to a dinner they had for Colonel Schretzman on the Friday night before the game. It was a big gathering. It looked like at least 50 or 70 people at a tailgate just outside there. There's a very nice Veterans Memorial between the stadium and where the ROTC building is, honoring Ohio State graduates who have died in service. And so it was very good to see. We also got over to the Association of Graduates reception, which was in one of the athletic department buildings, actually right across from the Jack Nicklaus building. There's a Jack Nicklaus Museum there. And so we had a chance to talk with their chapter president and one of their graduates from 2001. And then also Brigadier General Bill Turner from the 1st Infantry Division, who was there at the game, and we had a chance to chat about what life was like at West Point when he was a student in the 80s, and then also a little bit about the great infantry unit, the 1st Infantry Division, that he is I think he's the deputy commanding officer of that.
Red One.
Of the Big Red One, absolutely. So it was good. It was, actually, our friend Ryan Remley had told me, being more familiar with the campus, that there was a statue to Jesse Owens. And so after the game, I Googled where it was. Turned out to be in front of the track and field stadium, which is kind of on the far end of the athletic complex. But I got over there, got a nice picture of it. It's a beautiful statue right at the entrance to their track and field stadium. I believe they also play soccer there. And so that was really nice to see. And Jesse Owens, having been an Ohio State student in the early 1930s, and of course raced in the 1936 Olympics.
And won 4 Olympic gold medals.
That's right, to one of our most accomplished Olympians, and such an important figure in sports and American life for so many reasons. Also got a chance to see the Woody Hayes statue.
Thankfully, he's not trying to take down an opposing player in the statue.
No, they have a big indoor field house for football. I just got there. It was about 11 o'clock at night, but they have a glass enclosed lobby, and I can only see from the outside. But they had 4 or 5 Heisman trophies. They had their Rose Bowl trophies. I was looking at their Sugar Bowl trophies. I mean, they had a wall, 2 sides of this. It's kind of a glass enclosed cube, and 2 sides of it were just filled with trophies. And then in the center were their Heisman trophies. And they also had their national championship trophies. The new ones are those glass footballs. Right. And so they had a number of those. So I guess that's what you do when you go to an icon of college football at Ohio State. You see all of the trappings. Accoutrements. Well, Army's got its 3 Heisman trophies up.
Yes. And at the same time, before you got to Ohio State, you were able to track down an Army football alumnus.
Absolutely. On the way out there, I stopped in Pittsburgh and stopped at the Pittsburgh Steelers training camp and was able to chat and do an interview with a graduate of 2010, Ellie Hambra Villanueva, who's an Army football player, and 3-time he was deployed to Afghanistan. And he was decorated for heroism for a particular moment. And he was able to try out for the Philadelphia Eagles. He did not make the team, but the Pittsburgh Steelers saw something in the tapes and invited him to camp. They basically spent a year on the practice squad making him into an offensive tackle. He put on weight. He's now 320. And when we saw him at West Point, he was playing wide receiver his senior year.
And we saw that close, so close, almost touchdown in the end zone against Navy in that game.
Yeah, you and I were sitting in that end zone that year, right where Army was trying to score a touchdown that would have gotten them within, I think, a field goal of tying Navy. And so Trent Seelman's leading him down the field, and Villanueva goes in the end zone, and they do an alley-oop pass to him. And he's draped by 4 Navy players. I'll never forget it. It's right in front of us. And the ball just bounces off his hands, outstretched.
He had such a height advantage. That was the whole thing, that you had, he was a very tall wide receiver, and the people playing against him, while he was multiple covered, he certainly had a reach that was out beyond them. But when you have 8 arms going up against your 2, it's awful tough.
Well, very athletic, and that's one of the reasons that he was able to train and make the NFL. So we had a chance to visit. I asked him a little bit about, about that play, and he said, his whole experience at West Point was about preparing for serving in the Army. And he had made a comment in the press conference that it had been fun to play football, but it's time to go lead a platoon, which he did, and extensively. And it was Army Ranger. So we had a chance to chat. We have the video right up on our page, West Point Football Report. I also got a chance to visit with one of the Steeler captain, Cam Hayworth, who is 7-year pro. I'd met him when I went down to watch the Steelers play the Giants in an exhibition game, and Ali Villanueva was injured, so he wasn't available to do an interview. And great guy, very gracious. He's an Ohio State player, as a matter of fact, and he's done a lot of work with children's charities. So I was asking him a little bit about that, both in the Pittsburgh area and I believe in Atlanta, where he is from. And really a very gracious person to talk to. But boy, I was listening to their game against the Vikings driving back on Sunday, and he's making every other tackle.
Absolutely. He's a fantastic ball player, so it doesn't surprise me.
So it was a trip to Ohio State that was memorable. It was disappointing. It was physically difficult for the Army football team, for the players, playing a big opponent. But I tell you, you got to give Ahmad Bradshaw credit. I mean, he is so poised and a tough individual. He must have run the ball 20 times himself, getting no yards up the middle. They couldn't run the dive play against Ohio State. They were making most of their yards to the outside. But he's taken a pounding the whole game. And he's about 170. He's probably added a little bit of strength this year, maybe getting close to 200. But boy, did he take a pounding and just kept getting up time after time and leading his team. And it was great. We were talking a little bit about it in the post game, and we have the post game on our page as well. Now, for Army. Now 2-1 on the season. They're going to be going down to New Orleans, second road trip in a week, and we'll be playing Tulane. Tulane coming off a tough game at Oklahoma, a place Army's going to go visit next year, which is going to be interesting. But John, I know you've been looking at the Tulane team. They've got a new coaching staff, and they certainly have improved. And they came in to West Point and won 2 years ago. What do you see in the Green Wave?
Well, the Green Wave is interesting for 2017. The fact is they come into this game 1 win and 2 losses. They won their opener against Grambling State, but then they suffered a 23-21 very narrow loss to Navy. And as anyone knows, Navy plays the triple option just like Army, so it looks like that could be an influence here. And then they went out and, as you mentioned, last week they got demolished by Oklahoma, which the week before had demolished Ohio State, and they'd lost 56-14. It's an interesting team. They're coached by a fellow named Jack Curtis. Jack Curtis, for 3 years, was the defensive coordinator for Coach Monken when they were at Georgia Southern. And so he knows very well from their time there, and also now from having played Navy. They had played Navy twice when they were down at the Georgia Southern, and so as a result, they're used to the triple option situation. It's a very good team he's put together down there. They are averaging 241 yards per game, just over 100 yards per game through the air. Their quarterback, Jonathan Brantley, is a dual threat. He is averaging 148 yards on the ground in 2 games and 198 yards passing. Their top running back is a fellow named Dontrell Hilliard. He's got 208 yards on 45 carries and a pair of touchdowns. The top receiver for Brantley, who's obviously a big threat there, has been a fellow named Terran Encalade, and he's pulled down 9 catches for 111 yards, and that's averaging 12.3 yards per reception. Defensively, they're led by a fellow named Ray Juan Marbley, who has 20 tackles already, and Luke Jackson has 3.5 sacks. So this is a team that is very strong. They haven't played up to their potential so far. That close loss to Navy could easily have gone the other way. It was only a 2-point loss. They understand the triple option. Coach Curtis, being an understudy and a supporter for Coach Monken, knows Coach Monken's game plan. So this is going to be a tough battle for them, especially playing on the road, playing in New Orleans. And I don't think it's going to be an easy game at all for Army. I think Army can win. I mean, I think the fact that Navy has defeated them shows that they can be beaten. And I think that Army probably watched a lot of those game films to see what Navy did right and to see if they can duplicate them next or this coming Saturday down in the Crescent City.
Absolutely. I think Tulane's going to come out passing. They're going to be testing Army's defenders. Going to be some young players out there for West Point this week, especially. And so I think you're going to see Tulane passing. And so it's going to be a challenge, but Army's got a very strong offense, a very good offensive line, and the running backs and Ahmad Bradshaw. So again, it's trying to hold on to the ball and do their long, methodical drives, eating up clock and scoring touchdowns with the offense, with the running game. I think there was someone at the press conference today, on Tuesday was kind of asking Coach Munkin about it bringing passing into the offense. He says it's just not what they do. No. And I've watched it, and they will pass a couple of times a game. Unless they get behind, then they'll maybe go to pass 10 times a game. But it's just really to keep the defensive backs from cheating and moving up to the line.
Well, it's certainly not Bradshaw's strength. Ahmad Bradshaw is really matured and come into be an excellent choice for the triple option. He is able to throw the ball, not quite as well as, say, Trent Steelman, but as a senior, he has got the maturity that enables him to be able to hold the ball that last fraction of a second before he decides whether he keeps the ball or he gives it to one of the running backs. And that is certainly going to be an important aspect if they're going to win this game. I think you're right that the defense will be tested without Ryan England, without Jalen Sharp. This is a backfield that is untried, and I think that Tulane is going to try their best to see what they can do to exploit any weaknesses there.
So it'll be interesting. I want to thank our sponsors, especially helpful to help us get out to Columbus on Saturday. Again, we were the only New York media organization which made the trip. In fact, that's two road games in a row for us because we covered the bowl game in Dallas. And again, we were the only New York media which made the trip to follow the Army football team in person. And one of the things that was really neat, was our video, I think, of the alma mater, because I was able to run down like I typically do and be right in front of the front line of players. As you can see the disappointment in their faces, but they're standing at attention, helmets on their side, and they got tremendous applause by the fans and the cadets who were there and the cadet band. Very appreciative of response, and so that's what I think on the video you only get by being there. And we also have the pregame and the halftime and interviews with I think we did 6 veterans, including 2 veterans, the cadet battalion commander of the ROTC at Ohio State, and also a master sergeant there.
And I should point out, Ken, that I forgot to mention at Tulane, it will be Veterans Appreciation Day for the game, and the Tulane Athletic Department has arranged to give out 300 tickets free of charge to Vet Ticks and also to the Wounded Warrior Project. So that's a very nice gesture they're doing, and I think they've also made some discounted tickets available to military veterans with ID.
Well, any of the American Legion members down in Louisiana will hopefully be able to go and root on the Army team. I always tell people there are 1 million Army veterans in the American Legion, and we're so glad to be able to try to tell the story of the Army football team to those a million U.S. Army veterans that are members of the world's largest veterans organization. I was actually down at the American Legion headquarters in Washington yesterday talking about our project to continue to remodel Chaplain's Hill in Section 2 of Arlington National Cemetery. Met with Louis Selly, who's the director of the Veterans Rehabilitation and Health Division. Very helpful in our project. We're making progress to get that pathway built, which will provide access to the 4 monuments honoring chaplains at Arlington. And so we're going to another step forward on that project. Just want to thank our sponsors again. The Westchester Bank branches throughout Westchester. Veterans are invited to ask for the CEO when you call. Look for their website, thewestchesterbank.com. And Dr. Richard Davidson from Westchester Family Chiropractic and Wellness, 550 Mamaroneck Avenue, westfamchiro.com. We say Dr. Davidson takes care of pro athletes, college athletes, and the rest of us. And Marlene Follick at Pro Travel helped us with arrangements to get to Columbus. Premium travel for individuals and groups. Marlene travels all over the world and can tell you the best spots to go and get and arrange for premium accommodations. So I guess it's Marlene Follick, 914-992-5537. And Lee Kaufman at the White Plains Bakery, 466 Mamaroneck Avenue, the White Plains Bake Shop, right at the corner of Bloomingdale Roads, just across from the Chase branch in White Plains on Mamaroneck Avenue. I should say right next to the Westchester Bank branch. And they are preparing for the Jewish holidays. They were, and our best wishes to all our Jewish friends for the holidays coming up this week. And also, Getty Auto Services, they did some maintenance on my car before the trip to get set to drive. Drove 1,350 miles last week. We thank Tom. His son plays high school football. 634 Mamaroneck Avenue and 914-761-5324. The person to call if you ever have a problem, you're in the White Plains area driving through. Tommy is a guy to go to, takes care of all our cars. And also I want to remind everybody about the National Emergency Fund of the American Legion, taking care of veterans, taking care of the posts and the communities that have been affected by these terrible storms in Houston, Florida, and gosh, this new storm that's devastating Puerto Rico and the other Caribbean areas. The American Legion, the National Emergency Fund. Just look on legion.org, and there's plenty of information about how they're helping communities and veterans through these terrible times. Also, the forest fires out west in California, Oregon, Montana, so we say a prayer and offer our best to everyone who's been affected by this terrible series of weather events. But the American Legion National Emergency Fund, great charity to consider a donation to. And we've got Jack McGuirk, who has been following those other two service academies and our friends down at the Maritime College. Jack, what was going on this week while Army was playing Ohio State?
Well, Navy had their bye week, and this Saturday they're going to be taking on Cincinnati at home. Air Force also had a big game this weekend. They were up at Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the Michigan Wolverines in front of a crowd of 111,000 people. Another big crowd there. Unfortunately, they lost. First loss of the season, 29-13. Senior kicker Luke Strebel kicked a pair of field goals for the Falcons, a 37-yarder and a 50-yarder. The Falcons' only touchdown came on a 64-yard touchdown pass from quarterback Arian Worthman to wide receiver Ronald Cleveland. Worthman also rushed for 60 yards in the game. Michigan led 9-6 at the half. Both teams just hitting field goals in the first half, but scored the punt return, a 79-yard punt return for a touchdown by Donovan Peoples-Jones, giving them a 16-6 lead after the extra point. The Falcons' defense actually played pretty well in the game. They didn't allow a Michigan touchdown until the fourth quarter. Senior Jack Floor and Marquis Griffin had 11 tackles each for the Falcons, who they're now 2-1, and they're going to be taking on their division rival San Diego State on Saturday. And
where's that game going to be played, Jack?
Oh, that's going to be at Air Force, Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And our friends down at SUNY Maritime had a big win on Saturday, 38-31 over their rivals across the Long Island Sound, the Merchant Marine Academy Mariners. Quarterback Thomas Wright had 323 yards through the air on 22 passes, including 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Brandon Drumgoll and 1 to Matt Ward. Drumgoll caught 13 passes for 164 yards. Junior Andrew Jenny caught 3 passes for 68 yards. Jenny, by the way, is a local guy from the Bronx and a graduate of Stepinac High School, which is right down the road from here. Senior kicker Matt Murphy kicked a career-long 48-yard field goal with 2 minutes, 14 seconds left in the first half. On defense, Kendall Parker led the team with 12 tackles. Junior defensive back Matthew Maverich recovered a fumble and ran it back 25 yards for a touchdown. The Mariners were leading 31-24 going into the fourth quarter, but a 4-yard touchdown pass from Thomas Wright to Brandon Drumgold, followed by the extra point, tied the game. And the Privateers took the lead for good on a 2-yard touchdown run by Chris Olberding with a minute 9 left in the game. So the Privateers, they're now 3-0, just the second time in school history that they're 3-0. And they're heading into their bye week before taking on Alfred State at home in the Bronx on September 30th.
Okay, well, it's a good week for Maritime College, and our friend Clayton Kendrick Holmes will actually be doing a talk with him tomorrow. So watch on our page, Sons of the American Legion Radio on Facebook, and we'll see. Where did you say? Do they have a game this week, or do they have a bye?
No, they have City Maritime has a bye this weekend. Their next game is on the 30th.
Okay. So they'll have a week off, but interesting. Air Force played well. They're going to be tough. Army will travel to Colorado Springs the first Saturday in November, and Sons of the American Legion Radio will be there. And I also have to thank our friend Colonel Chris Sam Houston, who's going to be in New Orleans, and he's going to take some photos for us, and we're going to see if we can get him in the post game for the video. He'll video the alma mater for us. So just watch our page on Saturday. Also, Saturday morning, I'm going to do a call-in on this, since we had. I really appreciate it. We did a Facebook Live pregame from the press box at Ohio Stadium last week, and we got a lot of participation. It was really appreciated. The comments, one person overseas called in or wrote a comment in, and so we'll do something on Saturday from 10 to 11 on Facebook Live. You can watch that and talk about Army football, your thoughts about the season so far, and this very important game at Tulane. It's an opportunity for Army to go 3-1 on the year versus 2-2. But Tulane's in the same problem. They're 1-2, so they want to get back to even. So both teams, it's almost like a crunch week, when you get to this point and you have a chance to go 2-2 or for Army 3-1. Tulane obviously doesn't want to go 1-3. So this is a very important week. Army's dealing with injuries coming off the Ohio State game and having to go to younger players in the defensive backfield. So I think as John was saying, Army's got to really work on I think on the pass rush, because they've got to try to hurry the quarterback for Tulane and try to take the pressure off the young defensive backs who are going to be playing for Army. And so then also it's a lot more responsibility for the linebackers, Scott Washley, Alex Ackerman, Ken Brinson,